And Trump is basically saying that he embraces the ultra extremist spectrum of opinion inside Israel, which says we never should have removed our illegal settlers from illegally occupied Gaza.
So recently, Aaron Maté went on Judging Freedom, that's Andrew Napolitano's podcast, and talked about the trajectory for Israel's war in Gaza, Trump's policy toward Israel, and some other things. And what Aaron just said there is also reminiscent of things that Mike Huckabee said about Israel relatively recently, too. And, he's part of the administration now. So Aaron's the greatest. He's an excellent independent journalist. Let's hear what he has to say and react to it.
Does the IDF admit to killing journalists in Gaza?
They do admit to killing journalists in Gaza. They recently announced the killing of one journalist and said one of the reasons why they killed him is that he uploaded footage of October 7th, aka he did journalism. Because a journalist in Gaza uploaded footage to the internet of what happened on October 7th, this, in Israel's eyes, was sufficient grounds to murder him. So Israel was actually declaring that the act of journalism can get you killed. This person who was killed, and I'm sorry, his name escapes me, he wasn't involved in October 7th. He was simply doing what journalists do, which is upload footage to the internet. And Israel, given so much impunity by their U.S. sponsor, felt as if this was legitimate grounds to kill him. And they've killed so many journalists throughout this 18-month genocide. Of course, they claim that many of them are members of Hamas with zero evidence. And they're able to get away with it because not only is the Trump administration and Biden administration before given them complete impunity, but U.S. media also has no problem with Israel slaughtering mass numbers of journalists. In fact, a record amount of journalists since the Second World War.
Yeah, so at least 200 journalists have been killed by Israel since October 2023. You don't hear that much about it in the American media, but it has been reported, even by sources like MSNBC. Some of the mainstream sources have reported on this, and it's, been totally swept under the rug. If you heard, that a belligerent of the CIA, one of the CIA's boogeymen were doing that, that would be grounds for another endless war. It's what they tell us all the time in order to send us overseas, stuff like that. But when it comes to Israel, don't really hear that much about it.
Isn't this a violation of Israeli law, or do the laws not apply to the IDF?
Well, I mean, Israel's legal system is a little complicated because they don't even officially have a constitution. But certainly, yeah, they have some protections for journalism. But the whole point of Israel is that those laws don't apply to Palestinians because Israel is not a state of its citizens. It's not a state of the people that it rules over. It's a state of the Jewish people, the self-described state of the Jewish people. So it's a Jewish supremacist state. And therefore, in its eyes, and legally, really at this point, Palestinians simply just don't have rights.
Is that supremacy, or does that supremacy at all have a racial animus, since the Palestinians are darker skin colored than the Jewish people?
Well, it's I would say it's more ethnic because yes, I mean, Israel is a European settler colonial state, but there are Jews that come from the Middle East, that come from Ethiopia. You have, Black people in the Israeli military from African countries because they identify as Jewish. So I wouldn't say it's quite racial. It's certainly a form of ethno-supremacy, which is Jewish supremacy.
Just a few clarifying things. So he's right. Israel doesn't have a formal written constitution. It does have a set of what are called basic laws, and those are generally considered to have constitutional status. But Israel goes by more of kind of a British-oriented common law type of system than actually American written constitutionalism. And, American jurisprudence really has kind of followed in the train of common law through stare decisis and kind of adjudicating disputes by legal precedent, but Israel even more so. Also, it's worth pointing out, too, that Palestinians just don't have the same rights as Israelis in Gaza or the West Bank. You can take a look at the data on this when it comes to, disputes breaking out between peoples. The conviction rate of Palestinians is, so skewed in the favor of convictions. In Gaza itself, it's been under blockade. People can't leave. People can't come in. A lot of the time it's very hard. There's a lot of scrutiny applied. So there just isn't the same legal rights in, Gaza and the West Bank. There's no way to refute that.
Is there a racial component to American foreign policy in the Middle East?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, this is a matter of psychology. To what extent is U.S. sponsorship of Israel and fidelity to Israel, is it based on a sort of shared European settler solidarity, right? Like a fellow European settler state, just as we are. I think there's a component of that. It's hard to get into, who knows what's buried deep in people's psyches. But yeah, I think there's an element there. If the Palestinians were considered to be, white people, would Israel be able to get away with slaughtering them by the tens of thousands? Would the daily massacres of children, as we're now seeing day in, day out inside Gaza, would that be acceptable to a broad spectrum of opinion inside the U.S.? Probably not. So yeah, I think it's fair to say psychologically there is a racial component.
Here's Prime Minister Netanyahu's most recent statement about the Palestinian people. I think this will aggravate you no end, but I want you to see it and comment on it. This is yesterday in the Oval Office. Chris, cut number 6.
And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza, and enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want. I mean, they should have that choice. And the president put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there.
At no point has Netanyahu ever supported Palestinians going where they want, by the way, at any point during his reign. They've been under lockdown in this quasi-open-air prison called Gaza, unable to leave, unable to come in, and Netanyahu has done everything he can to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. He just has.
What the hell is he talking about free choice? Hey, Bibi, do they have the free choice to stay and be alive and have food, shelter, clothing, water, electricity, and medical care?
Yeah, exactly. Or do they have the free choice to return to their ancestral homes that Israel expelled them from in 1948? The majority of the people of Gaza are refugees or the descendants of refugees, meaning people who used to live in what is now Israel, but were ethnically cleansed in 1948. Do they have the free choice to return to their own homes? And if you meet Palestinians around the world, many people still have the keys to their old homes inside what is now Israel.
Wow.
Israel's never apologized for expelling them, never acknowledged that they were expelled, and never offered to compensate them for their losses. So there's this ongoing denial of ethnic cleansing, and now a new campaign of ethnic cleansing, because that's what Bibi Netanyahu is talking about, wanting to get people under the guise of their free choice to be expelled yet again to other countries, because they want to make Gaza completely unlivable and only livable for Jewish settlers, because Israel is a Jewish supremacist state.
Yeah, you talk to the mainstream conservatives and a lot of Trump supporters, generally right-wing Zionists, and they'll say, screw the globalists. We shouldn't have global government. And, the WEF and the UN and the EU are just horrific. But then when it comes to citing, the justification for the legitimacy of Israel, it's always like, oh yeah, there's a UN resolution that created that did that. And that's what they say. So it's just crazy. People talk about the dangers of centrally planned economies, and I agree, those dangers are insane. But then think about the dangers of centrally planned countries, because that's Israel.
Here's Netanyahu and President Trump together back and forth on this. This will also get under your skin. Chris, number 13.
Do you think blocking humanitarian aid is also an effective pressure?
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate. The level of death on the Gaza Strip is just incredible. And I've said it. I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace. How did that work out? Not good. They gave it away for a good intention, and it didn't work out that way. And
I think what the president talked about is, first of all, to give people a choice. You know, Gazans were closed in, and every other place, including in arenas of battle. I mean, whether it's Ukraine
Who closed them in?
or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They're locked in. And what is wrong with giving people a choice? Now, we've been talking, including over lunch, about some countries, I won't go into them right now, that are saying, you know, if Gazans want to leave, we want to take them in. And I think this is the right thing to do. If you give, you know, it's going to take years to rebuild Gaza. In the meantime, people can have an option. The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision. We're working on it. I hope we'll have good news for you.
Where to start to dissect that? Where to start with Trump's fundamental ignorance of the history of those peoples and that geographic area?
It's so easy to just shake your head in disgust at that and pass a moral judgment, but I'm just going to try to just stick to the facts. What's factually wrong with both those statements from Trump and Netanyahu? So let's take Trump first. He says that Israel owned Gaza and says never should have given it up. Israel never owned Gaza. It occupied it. It stole it in 1967 when it took it over by force. That's illegal under international law. There's a UN Security Council resolution 242 passed in 1967, which calls on Israel to withdraw from the West Bank and Gaza, which it illegally occupied. So,
And just note that what I said about the UN earlier in that resolution that a lot of kind of Zionists point to justify the legitimacy of Israel, when they're talking about Gaza, they almost never cite 242 like Maté does to say that Israel should have withdrawn from Gaza. It was an illegal occupation, and it was.
it was never Israel's to give up because they never owned it. They occupied it illegally. And what he's referring to is when Israel finally in 2005 pulled out its illegal settlers from Gaza. And Trump is basically saying that he embraces the ultra extremist spectrum of opinion inside Israel, which says we never should have removed our illegal settlers from illegally occupied Gaza. The reason why Ariel Sharon, who was prime minister at the time, why he pulled out of Gaza, it's not because he had all of a sudden he had a moment of consciousness, but because it was getting just too costly for Israel to maintain a few thousand settlers in Gaza, when really the most valuable land they wanted to steal was in the West Bank, because that's where the water is. So Sharon simply transferred settlers from Gaza to the West Bank so that Israel could focus on stealing West Bank land from Palestinians, not the Gaza Strip. And Trump is now saying, in joining the ultra fanatic Israeli settlers, we shouldn't even have done that. So it's just his extremism there, his extremism there, and revisionism is just off the charts. And then Netanyahu goes and says that the Palestinians have been locked in Gaza, unlike in other war zones like Ukraine and Syria, as if it's some sort of natural phenomenon. He says we didn't lock them in. What is he talking about? Ever since Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, it's put Gaza under siege, where people can't leave. Cancer patients die in Gaza, even before October 7th, because Israel won't let them leave. And Netanyahu now wants to pretend as if it's Israel that's not letting people leave. It's just the revisionism is off the charts. And for a U.S. president to be so extreme that he's now joining the ultra fascist right of Israel, not just the mainstream fascist right, but the ultra fascist right, that's a new level of moral depravity at the White House.
Yeah, Aaron Maté is right on here. Trump's intervention into Israel is extreme. I mean, one of the things that I don't think Trump really lied about, even despite all of his bombastism, is saying that, no one's more pro-Israel than I am. If pro-Israel means pro-Likud and pro, right-wing Israeli Zionist factions, he certainly is. This is a disaster. U.S. intervention in Israel is one of the most backward-minded foreign policy campaigns of my lifetime. And, it stems from long before my lifetime. So for Netanyahu to say that he wants there to be choice for Gazans is just insane. Israel's a centrally planned country built by globalists in 1947 and 1948. Many of its founders were secular Zionists. You know, many of its supporters now are secular or religious Zionists. And a lot of them are Christian Zionists. And it's never paid any dividends for the American citizen to be involved there. And for Trump to really green light the violation of his ceasefire that he orchestrated prior to taking office is also crazy. It really shows who owns America's politicians and where the foreign influence in the U.S. really comes from. It's not Russia, by the way. It's Israel and Ukraine. So that's what I have to say about it, but leave a comment below. Do you agree with Aaron Maté on this? What do you think Trump's next move is for Israel? And what do you think will happen there next? And until I talk to you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Take it easy, guys.